Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. A renter's bill of rights is coming to Canada, just announced by the federal government. We're going to talk about the components of this and if this is actually going to help out tenants moving forward. We're also going to touch on some of the changes that are coming to the temporary foreign worker program here in Canada. And then I'm going to take us to the city and municipal level and talk about some of the building issues that we're seeing across the Lower Mainland. Real quick before we get started, if this is your first time to the channel, my name is Hassan. I'm a real estate agent in the Vancouver area, and I make educational real estate content to help you on your real estate journey. I also make content designed to help you make your move in and around Vancouver. So if that sounds interesting to you and you want to chat with me one-on-one about your own situation, you can book me for a free call in the Calendly link below and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a future video. All right, so we're going to hop right into it. The Renters Bill of Rights was just announced by the federal government, actually here in Vancouver, one of the cities, if not the city with the highest rental rates across the country. There are three components to this rental bill of rights. I'll speak to them and then we'll talk about whether it's actually going to do anything for the market, whether it actually protects tenants or landlords. Number one is a disclosure requirement for landlords to disclose the rental history, the rental price history, to new prospective tenants so that they can bargain. So how it works right now is, if you have a property that you are renting out, you don't have to disclose what the last tenant was paying. No landlords generally do that. And a tenant would come up and they would see what the asking price is and they would decide whether that's something they want to pay or they want to move forward and look at other properties. So that's number one, that disclosure requirement. Number two is a fund, a $15 million fund that will be used nationally to protect against bad faith evictions, and this includes rent evictions as well. So this would be when a landlord is going to substantially renovate the property. Also, bad faith evictions generally is referred to the practice of landlord use eviction. So this is when a landlord is going to use the property. They have to use the property for a minimum of 6 months before they can re-rent it out. And some landlords out there do this in bad faith. They don't wait the 6 months, whatever it might be. So $15 million used as a fund nationally to, again, protect renters. And then the most interesting one is a requirement, and they're going to, the way the federal government mentioned this is they're going to call on the financial institutions, the organizations, to report credit history of rental payments made on time. So how it works right now is your rental payments, your rental history, if you are a tenant, does not go towards your credit score. And so, this would take a major shift, but ultimately what would happen is as they put it, timely payments would go towards building your credit. It would show a history of paying on time, and that would ultimately help you get into your first home because you'd have a better credit rating for having that good history in payments. So let's break this down. Let's talk about number one. So the requirement for the landlord to disclose what the previous tenant was paying so that tenants can negotiate. The reality is in the rental market here in Canada where, the rental vacancy rate is anywhere from 1.5% to, here in Vancouver for condos, 0.9%. There is no negotiation to be had. You can give a tenant as much data as you like about, the previous price for that property, but that's not going to dictate what a new tenant is going to pay today. And very often, that previous rental rate might be an old rate. The previous tenant might have been in there for 5 or 6 years, whatever it might have been. So to think that giving tenants the history of payment is going to allow them to negotiate a better rental rate. We're in situations where most rentals that are asking market value are getting multiple applicants right across the country. So maybe a little bit out of touch in terms of how this is actually going to help. Probably more so is just going to disappoint tenants when they see what the previous rents were and what they're paying today. So amidst this disclosure requirement, they're also going to work, the federal government is also going to work with the provincial government in creating a standard lease agreement across the country. Now, I don't know exactly how this can or will work because each province has their own set of mandates and rules and legislation when it comes to rentals, including rent control. So it's going to be interesting to see if and how that's going to play out. But in terms of point number one, the disclosure requirement, not really a big help. Number two, the $15 million fund to guard against rent evictions, bad faith evictions, to help tenants. That $15 million is going to get eaten up, almost immediately. Administrative costs, legal costs. I can't see a path that $15 million is going to go very far across the country when you're using it, in every single province. So that's yeah, it's not going to be a big help at all. It'll go through to some administrative, some legal costs, but not a big deal. The third and interesting one, where your timely payments will go towards your credit history, they will be reported. Remains to be seen, A, whether the institutions are going to be able to do this, but B, if they do it, will tenants' non-timely payment also be reflected? Well, and I think it would be. So, now you have a scenario where if you have tenants who are not paying on time, because the reality is there are a lot of tenants out there who are either choosing not to pay on time, they're not paying on time because they're unable to. Now, if that gets reported as well, that could be a negative thing for tenants, a positive thing for landlords, because landlords can now use that credit rating, that credit history, to better determine who to rent to. And really, the tenant out there who is not making payments all the time, they're putting themselves in a situation where they are unrentable to. You could not rent to that person. You would not want to rent to that person. And I think the way that this would work, again, if they are able to implement it, is that each payment should be reported to the credit bureau, whether it was on time, whether it was late. So I don't know how this particularly will benefit tenants. Maybe, yeah, the timely paying tenants could help them in some way, but I think implementation of this is going to be very difficult as well. So amidst these three components, and I've talked about, I'm not trying to shoot down all of the different components, but I'm talking in realistic terms how they may affect the market. And I don't think it's actually going to do very much. You might ask yourself, why is the federal government doing this at this time? And if you've watched my channel, I stay away from being political in any way, but let's make no bones about it. There's a lot of people in this country that feel like the situation that we're in when it comes to not just housing affordability, cost of living, the prices at the grocery stores, a lot of people put that responsibility on the federal government, and not to mention we have an increase in the carbon tax coming April 1st. So there's a lot of vitriol and blame being put towards the federal government, and a lot of that comes from this segment of the population that rents their properties, right? And this is probably a segment of the population that the federal government has lost the most over the years, are the tenants, those that they don't have equity in property, they don't own real estate. Let's face it, most real estate holders in Canada have done quite well under this federal government. Now, obviously, there's a lot of mortgage renewals coming up. We'll see how happy people are at that time. But this to me is no more than trying to win back some votes from a segment of the property that feels hurt the most from certain policies that have been put in place by this federal government. So, no more than virtue signaling, if you will, to kind of win back some of these voters. An election is not too far in the future. So just something to keep in mind. Unless there are some changes to this rental Bill of Rights, there's some additions added to. In my opinion, it's a whole lot of nothing. Now, secondly, I want to touch on very quickly the temporary foreign workers changes that are coming to this program. It was just announced by the immigration minister that they're going to set targets for temporary foreign workers. It's the first time that Canada has done this. Now, a lot of this came to light in the last year or so. Benjamin Tal at CIBC now basically came out and said, I believe it was Benjamin Tal, he said that, look, there's been a miscount of temporary foreign workers because there's been an assumption that temporary foreign workers come here and when their visas expire, they head straight back home, but that's not the case. Many of them stay here, work towards getting permanent residency. And so when we look at the number of temporary foreign workers in the province, about 6.2% of our total population are temporary foreign workers. Total population grew by over 1 million in the last year. We're at about 41 million or so. And they want to get this 6.2 percentage measure. They want to get that to 5% or below. So if you do the quick math on that, 1%, say 410,000. It's a significant number that they are going to reduce by. So this will be interesting to watch, because the timing of this, obviously, all of this stuff that we're doing with immigration, there was a student cap as well, international student cap. This should have been done, several years ago. And now we sit here in a time where, the government is having to be reactive. And let's not kid ourselves. We are in a scenario where, the baby boomers are getting older. Many are retiring. People are not having as many kids anymore. We need temporary foreign workers, probably not to the level that we have right now. But you begin to wonder where, all these measures are put in place at the same time, what sort of result is this going to have? So this does have some potential to have some effects on the market. Especially that cities now are changing the housing supply, how you're able to build out product. And that's the next thing we'll talk about at the city level, municipal level. We've talked several times on my channel about how everything is moving towards multifamily now. The provincial government in BC shifting zoning, mass rezoning to allow for multi-unit development, triplexes, fourplexes, you name it. So you would think, when we look at all of these components, we have the taxation that is being used to try and limit demand. We have the house flipping tax, federal level anti-flipping tax. We have the foreign buyer ban, so trying to reduce demand. We're going to be scaling back on immigration. So all of these different things we're putting into place, and we are increasing supply. That should create a scenario where, at some point supply would reach levels to meet the demand. But now when we look at the city level, what's happening now is some of the cities are actually charging more to developers in fees to be able to build the same products they've been building for the last couple of years. So here in BC, and I'll explain it very simply, when BC did their mass rezoning allowing for triplex, quadplex, you name it, they took away something called a CAC, a community amenity contribution. And what this was is it was levied on developers that were rezoning properties. So, for example, if it was a say a low rise, it was zoned for low rise, and the developer wanted to put some lots together, go high rise, rezone that property, the city would demand a CAC from them. And so basically the thing about the CACs is they weren't upfront and direct. There was no exact math how much that would cost, and oftentimes that would be placed on the developer at the later stages of the development plan. So they really didn't know what they were working with. So when the province changed this and they started mass rezoning properties, it took away the city's ability to charge these CACs. But instead, they're allowed to charge ACCs, amenity cost contribution. So a similar thing, but the difference is the ACC is upfront in terms of what you might pay. So the reason I bring all of this up, the city of Burnaby just recently announced their ACC fees, and some of the largest developers in the province are taking issues to this because, by their math, it increases the cost of building a one-bedroom condo almost 40,000 more than it was in the past. And so this number kind of blew my mind. And we're talking about Burnaby, which has been very pro-development. I don't need to tell you, so much development has happened in Metrotown, in the Brentwood area, Edmonds area. There's a reason for that. They've been very pro-development. The cost to build a one-bedroom condo under this new ACC provision in Burnaby is over $700,000. I think it was $718,000 is how they broke it down as the cost. And so now when you add on the developer margin, the desired margin on top of that, you're getting up there. You're getting up in the high 700s for what a one-bedroom might retail at. And so I bring this all up because we make all of these changes on the national level, on the provincial level, on the supply level to encourage more supply. And all of a sudden, it now becomes more difficult for developers to build again. And so we can't seem to get out of our own way when it comes to housing supply, whether it's the federal government getting in the way of the municipalities getting in the way of the provinces. It never seems to just flow smoothly. There's always some sort of hurdle standing in the way of getting that housing supply. And these developers have said Burnaby is going to be much less feasible of a market for them to build in if this were to go through. And Burnaby had the second most project completions last year. So as I mentioned, very pro development. So you got to wonder, and this is something very important to watch, is how are the other cities going to respond to being able to charge ACCs? And again, these are going to be upfront charges that are black and white that we're going to be able to see. Where in the past, a lot of these community amenity contributions, these discussions and negotiations happen behind closed doors. So as the public, we really didn't know, what this was costing developers. Now it's out in the open. So moving forward, I want to see how these are going to be charged in other cities. Vancouver, Coquitlam, Richmond, North Vancouver. How are these going to be levied out? Because that is going to dictate, the level of housing supply we're going to be able to bring to the market. So you can do all you want on the demand side. You can protect tenants all you like. You can create all the taxation that you want. But if you make it more difficult for the developers to build this year than it was last year, when housing starts are already flat or down, we're going to be in some significant trouble still when it comes to housing supply. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, hit the like button, because what that does is it takes the video and it sends it out to more people so they can learn from it as well. And if you enjoy this weekly real estate content, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss next week's video. And lastly, again, if you're in the Vancouver area or the Fraser Valley, you want to chat with me one-on-one about your real estate situation, you can book me for a free call or just send me a text, give me a call, shoot me an email, whatever's easiest for you. I'd love to chat with you, but I want to thank you for watching this week's video, and I look forward to seeing you next week.